Happy Diwali, everyone. Well, I'm Vanessa Gomez-Brake, Associate Dean of Religious Life. Thank you so much for being here for the third of our fall series. Today, we will have Sumun Pendakur speaking to us. But before that, I'm going to tell you a bit about what this program is all about, as well as some other upcoming events on our campus. So What Matters to Me and Why is a series that represents a creative solution to an important problem in the university setting, that separation of intellectual life from the personal and the spiritual. So this offers the Trojan family an opportunity to hear from USC faculty, administrators, and trustees in a different way. Rather than lecturing on their area of expertise or research, we invite speakers to share their life journey with us. Once a month during this Wednesday lunch hour, we get to listen in as they reflect on their values, their beliefs, and their motivations that have helped to shape their lives. If you would like to nominate a member of the USC community to speak at a future event, please visit our website, orl.usc.edu. And Sumi, I have to tell you, you were nominated, but for some reason this form is anonymous. I have no idea who nominated you, so I hope you're out there. Additionally, if you want to view any of the videos from today's event or past events, you can go to our website. There's a link to our YouTube page as well. There is a wealth of information there from many different faculty, administrators, and so forth from the last 18 years. So really, this is a part of the university archive, really documenting our staff here. And because most of you will likely be gone in December, we are going to have our last event on November 28th. And so that week after Thanksgiving, I hope you'll come back on that Wednesday to hear from Jaime Velasco. He's with the Facilities Management Services. He's a close friend of the Office of Religious Life and has worked at USC for nearly 20 years, so longer than this program has existed. And we decided to invite him to be one of our featured speakers this semester because he has such an interesting life story and journey to share with us, having been from the South Central Los Angeles area and always a member of the Trojan family since his young age. And because he's such a special friend, Dean Varun Soni will be here to introduce him that day. So before we begin, I want to tell you about just 3 more programs that are coming up here soon. Next week on Tuesday, we will have Murali Balaji on campus, journalist, author, and academic with 20 years of experience in diversity leadership. We're going to have him at the Fishbowl at the University Religious Center, and he's going to be talking about whether faith and social justice movements are irreconcilably disconnected. Free dinner in the Fishbowl, 6:30 next Tuesday. Also, we're partnering with the Polymath Academy at Doheny. So next Wednesday, if you want to talk about polyfaith, I don't even know what that is. They created that word just for this event. So again, we're going to have a free meal, and we're going to discuss religion and polymathic thinking. So that's at 5 o'clock, Wednesday, November 14th. And lastly, this one should be familiar to many of you. Our Ansar Service Partnership will be hosting their annual Fastathon over at the Catholic Caruso Center. It is a free annual event that partners with the National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, where individuals pledge to fast for the whole day to help sponsor a meal for someone who needs it. And the day ends with a banquet at the Caruso Center where you all get to share in a dinner and hear guest speakers and performances. And the money that will be raised this year will go to Isla LA, an organization dedicated to serving the South Los Angeles community. All right, that's it for my announcements. Please take a moment. We're out of water, but I'm sure we still have a few more sandwiches, so if you need seconds, please help yourself. After today's talk, we'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A, so have a question ready, and then our colleague Matthew back there will be running the microphone around the room so we can get it to you. Today, we'll be hearing from Sumi, Chief Learning Officer and Director of the USC Equity Institutes. She will be introduced by Jade Agua, the Associate Director for Learning and Organizational Development at the Race and Equity Center. Jade has been a member of the Trojan family for a very long time, having graduated from USC with a bachelor's in sociology, and then again with a master's in public administration. So please join me in welcoming Jade to the stage.
Thank you, Vanessa. It is my distinct pleasure and privilege to introduce to you all Dr. Sumun Pendakur, or as some of us know her, Sumi. Today, I want to share with you all about an award that Sumi did not receive. About a year ago, 10 women, myself included, nominated Sumi for the Zenobia Hikes Memorial Award, which is sponsored by the NASPA Center for Scholarship, Research, and Professional Development for Women. I believe that Sumi did not receive this award for two main reasons. Firstly, the award is limited in scope to the advancement of women in higher education and to student affairs. While the women who submitted letters of support did include a program coordinator, assistant directors, an associate director, a senior associate dean of students for diversity and equity, and even an assistant vice president, a whole pipeline really of women in student affairs, Sumi's mentees span far beyond the boundaries this award sought to recognize and go on to include a teacher, coach, and curriculum coordinator for a network of grades 6 through 12 schools, an associate with the world's largest asset manager, and a resident physician in emergency medicine. And these are only a snapshot of the lives that Sumi's mentorship has made an impact on. Secondly, I believe Sumi did not receive this award simply because there are not enough spaces or places for us to recognize, lift up, honor, and celebrate women. Let me say that again, just in case. There are not enough spaces or places for us to recognize, lift up, honor, and celebrate women. We must make them. And in some cases, we must take them, as more than 100 women are projected to win seats in the House of Representatives after last night's elections. Yes, please, let it out, folks. Yes. And let us take this time then to be one of those spaces. I wanted to use this opportunity to share some of the excerpts from the letters of support with enthusiastic approval from all writers for the award that, again, Sumi did not receive. One woman wrote, "Sumi was much more than just a boss to many of us. She modeled a way to be compassionate, but also ambitious and achievement-oriented in a way that many of us, especially women of color, had never seen before." Another said, "As a strong and established woman leader, she often provided me with the affirmation and encouragement I needed to be brave in my role. Sumi is still the first person I call when I need support or advice, and she always makes the time and space to answer my calls and check on me." Another, "I admire her courageous and compassionate heart as an advocate, her unwavering fight for justice and equity, and her ability to challenge us to think critically and act justly. She leads with both authenticity and integrity in both her professional and personal life." Dr. Pendakur truly embodies the saying, "Lift others as you climb." She set the bar high for my understanding of what spirited leadership with conviction looks, sounds, and feels like. For so many of us who grew up under her mentorship, she continues to be a North Star, balancing unyielding high expectations and loving warmth to push us forward. I am where I am because Sumi committed to being my coach at critical moments in my career. I will be forever grateful. And from my own letter. As an undergraduate student in my final year, I worked at Asian Pacific American Student Services. Holler, APAS, I see you. That's right. At the University of Southern California when Sumi began as the assistant director. I had not worked with her for very long when she left a copy of her award nomination for me to receive the Order of Troy, a highly coveted student recognition award, as you all know. I was stunned and humbled, and I learned some of the most important lessons that Sumi has ever taught me and would continue to be a role model for. To see the value in women's work and lift it up for well-deserved recognition, to help other women see the value in themselves, to give appreciation and affirmation freely and sincerely. It is not a finite resource, and that helping others shine brighter doesn't make your own light shine any less. As an Asian American woman, I experience feeling invisible on a daily basis. Sumi continues to see me and lift me up in a way that I will never fully be able to reciprocate. I think most of you would agree that the loss of this award does not make the profound impact that Dr. Pendakur has had any less real or meaningful. And again, this is merely a handful of the many students and colleagues that Sumi has supported throughout her career and life. Please join me in recognizing, lifting up, honoring, celebrating, and welcoming to the stage Dr. Sumun Pendakur.
That is the nicest introduction that involved an award I didn't get I've ever received in my life. Jade Keala Agu, I love you. Thank you, sister friend. I am delighted to be here with you today. Thank you so much for making the time to come out and eat sandwiches and hear me talk for a little while. I'm so incredibly moved and humbled by the generosity of that introduction. Jade, thank you for that. She's kicking extra hard. She's like, thank you, Auntie Jade. So I wanted to center this talk today, not so much in my work, my daily work around racial justice and racial equity in higher education, but on a more personal story, which was the sort of challenge and the call given by Vanessa and by Varun. I'm grateful for their invitation for what matters to me and why. And before I start on this sort of like personal narrative, let me just center this. Vanessa wished you all a happy Diwali. Happy Diwali from me too. I don't normally rock this every day, as many days as I can, but Hindus around the globe, as well as Jains and others, have been celebrating Diwali all week. And it's essentially, in the most sort of simple way, a way to mark the victory of good over evil. Light over darkness, and that is sort of the theme of this talk, is the twin pairing of darkness and light in every one of our lives. Now, Diwali has many stories associated with it, and some of the most popular are the following three. So what I want to do is just start off with a quick storytelling expedition around Diwali, and then connect this concept of light over darkness, to 3 points in my own life in which people have lifted me out of the dark places of my life. So let's get started. So anybody identify as Hindu or Jain, Buddhist, anything in the room? Okay, homies. All right. Glad you're here. There's 2.5 of you. That's very exciting. We'll take it. We'll take it. So again, many stories associated, just like in all cultures around the world, many stories associated with this observation of the victory of good over evil, right? In this story, I actually got a screenshot of the comic book series that I love, that I grew up reading, called Amar Chitra Katha. Translated, Eternal Picture Stories. These are comic books that most Indian Americans are familiar with because it's our first consumption of Hindu mythology and Indian history and other things. But this is a story of Krishna and his wife Satyabhama defeating the demon Narakasura, who had kidnapped 16,000 women. And Krishna not only freed them, defeated the demon, but he also got 16,000 women. So I mean, it was all in all, a good day for him. Now, lights are lit in Naraka Chaturdasi to mark the vanquishing of evil. So this concept of light being lit, and some of you may have seen some of your friends or community members lighting diyas or deepas, small oil lamps or electric lights if you live in a dorm and can't have an oil lamp, to commemorate this idea that this light exists. A secondary story, not a secondary story, one of the main stories associated, of course, the story of Rama. If any of you have ever had the chance to read the Ramayana, which is one of the greatest epics in mythological storytelling from around the world, it's the longest epic poem in the world, longer than the Iliad, people. Check your Eurocentrism. Okay. But the story of the lights has to do with Rama, his wife Sita, his brother Lakshmana, their faithful monkey god friend Hanuman, who have all been exiled for 14 years. And it's a huge epic story, like many of these are. But when he's finally able to come back to the city of Ayodhya after 14 years, the people of Ayodhya have lit the path with small deepas or diyas to light his way home. And so this idea of homecoming comes through this idea of light over darkness. He has, in this process, vanquished the demon Ravana, a brilliant, musical, genius, talent, ruler of Lanka, who also happened to kidnap Sita, therefore creating this mega battle that resulted in his vanquishing and Rama's winning and being able to go home. That's a secondary story. Got another story, of course, and today is the final day of Diwali. Many of us who identify as coming from Hindu cultures, traditions, or family backgrounds will leave lights on. It's not environmentally conscious, but it is what we do. So we've got the lights on because we're welcoming the goddess Lakshmi into our homes, the goddess of wealth and prosperity, to bless our homes for the year. We also propitiate Lord Ganesha, who is the remover of obstacles, the elephant-headed god, son of Shiva and Parvati. And we welcome these gods and goddesses into our home with lights and fireworks. If you ever get a chance to look at the map of India on Google Maps on Diwali night, it's incredible. You compare it to the rest of the world, it's literally lit up. It's something stunning to see. All across India, because it's not just Hindus who celebrate, right? Most people will be celebrating this massive holiday. Now, I didn't necessarily come here only to talk with you about Hindu traditions, primarily because I'm an atheist. So this is part of the story, right? Life is complicated. I identify as a Hindu atheist because I'm culturally connected, traditionally connected. That's where the roots of my family come from, but I've never believed in God. So I feel culturally connected to these stories, but not religiously. The thing that always speaks to me about these stories, even with my critiques of these stories as patriarchal, casteist, colorist, all these kinds of things, is the idea of the possibility of victory, of light over darkness. Jade mentioned all of the women who were elected. We have kicked Scott Walker out of Wisconsin, right? Ronner out of Illinois. Amendment 4 passed in Florida, restoring the rights to felons to be able to vote, to get back their right, to be not permanently disenfranchised. So in the middle of the darkness, there are these points of light that we have to keep on grabbing onto. That motivates me. So I want to actually shift then to thinking about this concept of storytelling. Storytelling, how many of you come from cultures or backgrounds in which storytelling is important to you? Almost two-thirds, over two-thirds of the room just raised your hand. Storytelling is such an important part of our lives because it connects us to something greater than us. It connects us to home or tradition or culture, values, ancestors, all sorts of things. So I want to tell you 3 stories today about points of personal darkness and the people, the points, the moments of light that lifted me out of those places. So story 1. It was 2008. I was in my first year of being the director of USC's Asian Pacific American Student Services. What up, APAS? I was also in the first year of the EDD program at Rossier. Hello, Rossier friends. And one morning, I woke up with a near crippling pain down my left side, and I was screaming. I turned to my partner, Sunil, and I said, honey, something's breaking my leg. Something's breaking my leg. That's the level of pain I was in. We were traveling at the time. I had walking pneumonia. I had this pain. It was a very awkward time. Came back to LA, went to the doctor, MRIs. Turns out there was a large tumor growing at the base of my spine, sitting on top of a nerve root that was creating this excruciating pain down my left side. Now you can imagine, I'm juggling this new directorship. I have my first year in the EDD program. Jade mentioned I'm ambitious. I try to get stuff done. I don't want anything to fall off a plate, but I can't move. And this tumor then, of course, caused the necessity for major surgery. So they cut me open, pushed aside my organs, went to the back, cut off the tumor. In the process of removing the tumor, they nicked the nerve that it was sitting on top of. How many of you have experienced a surgery that did not go quite the way you wanted it to go? Yeah. Now, that caused me to go on to various medications. Nerve medications, steroids to heal the nerve damage that was also creating its own type of fairly awful pain. One of the things that happens, of course, is that you don't know what your body's going to react to. Turns out I was allergic to steroids. You know how they give you a list of every single side effect that could occur if you take a medication, including and up to death? That list, turns out every one of those things. That's not what my face normally looks like. I couldn't bear to look at myself in the mirror. I had moon face, that's what it's called, moon face. I had something called buffalo hump. A hump at the base of my neck called buffalo hump. Who names stuff like that? By the way, my doctors told me this is a geriatric pregnancy because I'm 42. We're gonna have a whole nother what matters to me and why about names. So I was angry, I was hungry all the time. I packed on the pounds, put on 40 pounds in less than 2 months. I was exhausted and I was grief-stricken. I felt betrayed by my body. I felt betrayed by the medical field. I kept going on. Here I'm being interviewed for a documentary about Vincent Chin. Why? Jade was yelling at me at the time, go home and rest, but that's the third talk we'll give later on, next semester, about why it's hard to say no to things, right? So in this time of darkness, when I was filled with rage and anger and a sense of betrayal, I was searching for points of light. And they were sometimes far and few between because this lasted for many, many months. Ultimately, the steroids caused something called osteonecrosis, which is death of the bone, literally translated, in my hips and my knees. So I ended up on crutches in the later part of that year. Continued being a director, continued the doctoral program, but my body was not in a place to actually be able to fully function with any of these kinds of things. It's only later that you recognize, sometimes you keep pushing through in those moments. Later on you recognize the pushing through maybe was not the best idea. But let me flip this around. Even in the middle of all of this, the points of light that existed that brought me out of that darkness, that particular darkness. I don't know if you can see, but that's Jade up there. Pre-child and pre-sleep deprivation. This is my partner, Sunil. I didn't want to miss a beat, so we actually headed up to the API Policy, Asian Pacific Islander Policy Summit up in the Bay Area. And Jade wheeled me through the airport in a wheelchair so that I didn't have to miss anything. She's been my partner in crime for almost 12 years, 13 years now. Jade was the one who did that because my knees were too damaged for me to walk. And she supported me in the way that I needed her to support me. Isn't that the thing we're all craving? Support in the way that we need to be supported, not in the way that others think we should be supported. I mentioned that's my partner, Sunil. We'll celebrate our 20 years together in January. He didn't let me be alone with my anger and my sadness. It would have been very, very easy for me to be very alone with the level of anger and sadness that I had and the feeling of betrayal that I had. But he didn't let me be alone. And so many people didn't. My APAS family, my community, so many people on this campus, my friends, my own family, my parents came out to take care of me. And these are those moments where, at that moment, sometimes you don't realize what the blessing is. It's only later on that you think, to be surrounded by that type of community, in the broadest sense of the word, is incredibly meaningful. And I've never taken that lightly. Because that could have been a moment where I sunk deeper and deeper into anger. And for any of you who haven't experienced bodily trauma, when you feel that vulnerable, it's very easy to want to sort of shut others out. And people didn't let me shut them out. So that's one point of light. Community, family, friends, my love, who didn't let me shut them out, who allowed them to come in. Story 2. Now we're into 2012, almost 2013. I'd had 2 miscarriages. We were ready to have a child. And then finally successfully naturally got pregnant in the May of 2012, right after I decided to leave APAS. Just kidding, I love APAS. I love USC. Don't love the budget cuts. And so right after I left my job at APAS to become the Dean for Diversity and Inclusion at Harvey Mudd College, which is a small STEM-focused liberal arts college right here in Southern California, one of the Claremont colleges. And they were, of course, very lucky. They got 2 for the price of 1. This story, though, was complicated by a variety of things. That's me in the hospital bed at Cedars-Sinai. I'd had an intense pregnancy, overall good, 14 weeks of nonstop churning nausea in the beginning, then sciatica, which is not cute. It sounds like something somebody much older should get, and then you walk around saying, I've got sciatica. It's like you can't say it in any other way than I've got sciatica. So Ross is vibing with me on that one. But here, at this point, I was about 73 hours into labor, 65 of which was unmedicated, 8 of which was on an epidural. We can have a whole conversation later about why I made that choice, but that's, again. And I will describe to you that 65 hours of unmedicated labor is like being in a never-ending tunnel of pain that you can't escape from. There's nowhere to go because it's in your body. And you can't stop it. Now, when my son, Shashi, the love of my life, finally came out, I tore extensively and my tailbone snapped. This is not an advertisement for birth control, just to be very clear about that. Some of you may take it that way, although I'm a big believer in it. At this point, I was this many hours in, and I was only 5 centimeters dilated. So for any of you folks in the room who've been through this process, you still have 5 more to go before they allow you to push. It was a very interesting time. Now, this is me a couple weeks after giving birth, exhausted, with a cracked tailbone, wearing this thing called a My Breast Friend. Any women in the crowd have used this before? Yes. First of all, it's not your friend, okay? You're supposed to wear this, and it's supposed to create something that the child can rest on to access your various body parts. And it's called BREST, get it? Like breast but best. Some dude invented that, let's be honest. Let us be honest. My breast friend was not a friend. I couldn't sit, so I was standing and nursing for months until physical therapy, a couple months in, that I couldn't get myself to, that a friend drove me to. Thank you, USC Physical Therapy, I appreciate you. And in the middle of all that, deeply in love with this little dude, Shashi Pendakur Malhotra, who, of course, brought me immense joy every day. Now, that was hormonal joy. I'd be like breastfeeding and cry, I love you so much, right? But it was immense joy, a type that I cannot describe, that consumes you in the most beautiful of ways. And I was and am very much deeply in love with him and in the family that we're making. But it wasn't easy. I was physically and mentally traumatized. In the past, friends, family, community, and Sunil had been my points of light, but in this case, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough by any stretch of the imagination. In this case, it was therapy. Therapy helped me to understand birth trauma. Therapy gave me a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, which I didn't think that I could have because I wasn't a combat veteran, but you can. It helped me to understand why I couldn't hear other women's successful birth stories without being consumed by rage or tears, why I couldn't talk about my own experience without sobbing. And it turns out time and therapy both were the light I needed in this particular situation to give me the words to process my experience and the strength to do it all over again. And it's a multi-year process for any of you, again, who have been through any kind of physical, mental, or bodily trauma. It takes time to even be able to name what it is you're experiencing, and particularly if it's happening in the context of birth, where you're so focused on healing your actual physical body. In my case, nursing successfully, and the latch, and flange the jaw, and all the things. Is he getting enough milk? I don't know. How do I know? How do I measure my own breast? I don't know. This is so confusing. There's a lot of confusing things that happen in the first year of parenting, right? But when family and friends and community and my loves were not enough, I needed to ask for help. And that light that therapy gave me to be able to name what it was I was experiencing, to not feel ashamed about what I was experiencing, to know that I wasn't alone in what I was experiencing, was another light that brought me out of that potential darkness, the possibility of darkness. So story 3. 2018. The world feels dark. Authoritarian strong men drive the goodness out of nations around the world. Even with the good things we see, we can also see the decline in virtue in the most meaningful of senses across the globe. Whether we're talking about Bolsonaro in Brazil, Trump here, Modi in India, Netanyahu in Israel, all around the world we see this happening. I'm consumed by fear as Sunil and I contemplate bringing another child into the world. In case you couldn't tell, I'm about 4 weeks away from delivering a baby, a girl this time. And this time, the journey to pregnancy has been easy. It's been a good pregnancy, besides her sitting on my lungs all day. But I got pregnant quickly, there were no miscarriages, it's been healthy, there's been no nausea, and in a strange way that's actually amplified my fear. Is it okay? And what am I bringing this baby into? What world am I bringing this baby into? I think it's a thought or a concern that occupies the minds of parents all around the world. I'm not unique in this concern or this fear. But it's something that has kept me up some nights. That's what iPhone cases are for. So let's talk about the light. I've mentioned family, community, my partner. I've mentioned therapy. But in this case, I want to just talk about hope. Sheer, unextinguishable, inexplicable hope. Indefinable hope, the possibility for joy and even more love. That was the day we told Shashi we were going to give him a baby sister. And he was ecstatic. His head was on my belly right away. He was talking to his baby sister. He was making plans about when they were going to go see the movies. I mean, there was a lot going on. It's very, very exciting. And it is beautiful to watch him take on his newest identity as older brother. And the hope, when I say it's inexplicable, it's indefinable, it's because it is. It doesn't make sense, right? The rational mind says that there's no reason to hope. I read the news, you read the news. Well, I read certain news sources. And it feels wrong. Things feel wrong. But here's what I do. I derive hope from the work I get to do through the USC Race and Equity Center, tackling seemingly insurmountable problems across the nation that face our college campuses. I derive hope seeing organizers across the nation never give up in the face of precarious obstacles. People are talking about Georgia and Florida and other places, but The organizers on the ground are the ones doing the work, and they have mobilized people like nobody else's business. So I want to give them mad props. I want to give props to women of color all across this country who are lifting up policies, who are pushing forward and demanding more than what our nation has ever promised any of us. So that hope is a wellspring that builds on to the other things that I mentioned to provide this third source of light. I wanted to share, just a couple weeks ago, we did a family photo shoot. We've never done a professional photo shoot ever in our lives. I don't know if you can see this. That is very much his personality. I was like, this is going to be so nice. We're going to have these like really beautiful photos. And then there's him between our legs. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, right? These are the human manifestations of my hopes and dreams. And our collective laughter as a little family of 3 and soon to be 4 lifts me out of the darkness every single time. This is one of the most personal talks I've given, where I've talked about things that have been very painful and difficult for me. The work that I do and I have done for the last 15, 17 years is also rigorous and meaningful and often painful and very, very personal. But thinking about today's talk, I really wanted to share with you some of what guides me and makes me and fills me and lifts me. And particularly because when it turns out that the date Vanessa asked me to do this on is Diwali, I thought it couldn't be any more fitting to be able to focus on this concept of points of light that bring us out of our darkness. So as I close, I hope you'll reflect on all the points of light, the deepas or the diyas in your life that lift you, embrace you, and drive away your personal demons. May your path today and always be well lit. May you be surrounded by friends, family, and community that guide you. May you seek out the help you need when you need it. And may you eternally be hopeful. Thank you for letting me share some of my journey with you today. I appreciate you being here very much. Cheers. Apparently we take questions.
Yeah, so if you have a question, Matthew will run this mic right over to you. Please raise your hand.
Hi, Sumi.
Hey, Kathy.
I don't think I ever knew, where did you grow up?
Evanston, Illinois, right outside of Chicago, north side.
Hi, Sumi.
Hi.
Nice to see you. You spoke a little bit about what it is like to bring a child into this world. And I agree with you that I think many women and parents think about that. I personally think about that as someone who has not brought a child into this world yet, but
And apparently after today, we'll probably never.
Rethinking that decision, or possibility, I should say. But I'm wondering if you could say a bit more about what it is like. How do you balance that fear and that joy that I saw you have with your son, in terms of facing the scary circumstances that we exist in?
That's a beautiful question. Thank you. I think one thing that fellow parents will agree with is that your child doesn't have time for your worries. In a good kind of way. So when I pick him up from his after-school program, he just started kindergarten a couple months ago. We are in it to do Legos and play with dinosaurs and do math. Apparently, he's really into math. Not my baby. And in a strange way, like knowing how pure that is is such a gift, right? And that pureness, I mean, I know two things about it. One, that it's short-lived, right? And two, that the immense amount of privilege I have in that arena also, to know that he has that pureness in his life. He is a little brown boy, and he will experience things as a brown boy and as a brown man, but I have the ability to protect him in certain ways that other communities and other families don't at this point in time, or have never had. So I do try to provide both reality and protection as balance points for him to talk about things that matter in the world. You know, we've talked about Donald Trump and some of his policies, and why are children locked up in cages. What are the ways that he as a child can relate to that and knows that how fundamentally wrong that is, right? And at the same time, creating the space to build Lego dinosaurs. Because this is me personally, I don't want that purity and joy snatched from him too early. I want him to have something to hold on to and build forward on. So I guess that's one thing that we do that sort of just helps me to be centered in who is he today? And how do I stay focused on who this little dude is and what his happiness and joy and aspirations, and how do I get him to bed? You know, all those important questions, right? I think the second part of this is figuring out how to find a community of friends, colleagues, you know, whether they're fellow parents or not, to have these conversations with, so you don't feel like you're doing it alone, right? Jade and I talk a lot. I talk with other mommy friends a lot about how are you dealing with the fear, anxiety, and joy that all coexist at the same time, and finding ways for your child to understand that while also not quashing it at the same time. And I think that having that group of people that you can be brutally honest with and that can be brutally honest with you is such an important part of this particular aspect of our journeys, because there's very little that's pretty about parenting. I mean, that last photo I showed you is really nice, but that's a photo, right? We live these curated lives on Facebook and Instagram. These are pictures, snapshots of the hard work, of the really hard work, right? So yeah, I hope I answered some of that question for you. Great question. Hey, Sable, hey.
Thank you very much. Your words have been great. Even though I know you, it's always great to kind of hear deeper stories from your journey. This theme of light and darkness is very intriguing to me, especially because, yes, I know that sometimes it's society, but I also know that sometimes you've heard the don't hide your light under a bushel. But we also know that, like, there are plenty of haters and people out here trying to dim your shine. So, particularly as your words, I take so much inspiration from them as far as, like, how I can also shine bright, the way you shine bright, the way that, you know, light inspires others to be in the light. But can you give any advice or just any thoughts on how we can shine bright in our own realm, not only to inspire others, but in light of the darkness? Because yes, sometimes it's society, and then sometimes there are just like haters that you're like, really, I'm just trying to out here to do my thing. And so just anything you could share with that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. Well, we also live in a really interesting time of very, very high critique from specific sectors. How many of you are active on social media, Twitter, Facebook, any place, right? And it's very, very, very easy to be critical of others without a lot of acknowledgement of one's own positionality or journey or work or anything like that. So it's such a good question, Sable. So I think two things. One, I'm at a place in my life where if you don't like what I have to say, there's various gestures that usually accompany this part. Only because I know I have limited time and energy, and I need to be able to meet the people I need to meet so that they can go on the journey with me. Whether this is about community, raising family, whether this is about the work of racial justice and racial equity, whether this is about, you know, representation of Asian Americans in media. My husband's starring in a play. You should go see it. It opens Friday. Right? Any of these kinds of things. Limited time, limited energy. Where am I going to focus it, right? And you're right. Detractors will always exist. There will be detractors in every single one of your lives, and my life too. The question for me that comes down to that is there a kernel of truth in anything that they're saying? If I pull it apart, and if I'm honest with myself, is there a kernel of truth? And of that kernel of truth, what then can I make as a change in myself in terms of either behavior, outlook, language, anything else? And if there is no kernel of truth, if it's straight up hateration, well then deuces. Like, I don't have time for you. I don't. Like, I literally don't have time for you. I don't wear a watch anymore. That's how little time I have. Right? And so, but I do think that things need to go together. It can't just simply be like dismissal without the acknowledgement of what is the potential kernel of truth in what a detractor might have to say. All of that can only go to hopefully build you up to be the person you want to be, right? Because we all have the stated version of the person that we're trying to be, and we are on that journey to become that person, right? So if any of that can help us become that person, fantastic. And if not, if it's meant to derail us from becoming that person, then put your blinders on and keep going. Keep going, right? And I will say, and Jade mentioned this in her beautiful introduction, right? I love giving positive affirmation. I love hugs. Most of you know who have been hugged by me, that I'm also a very ferocious back patter. But part of that is because I think that sometimes we end up being so separated from one another that like just the very act of saying, I'm proud of you, I'm impressed by what you're doing, I'm excited for the next step in your journey, we don't even get to hear that enough. Because others, and even ourselves, are so busy critiquing. And this is not me saying do not engage in self-critique. Please do engage in self-critique. But not at the expense of self-worth, right? And the self-worth that then guides you to be able to give that generously to others, which only, right, light is beautiful, it refracts, it multiplies. That's the only, I think, antidote we have. Obviously, we have organizing, we have solidarity, we have movement politics, we have ways to educate, right? I'm an educator in my heart. All of that we need to do. And at the same time, we need to approach that work the way that we do it without, for me, without bitterness in my heart. There's days where I'm still rage-filled. I am disappointed in the way, yet again, white women have voted in these elections. We have to name these things that we want to be better. And at the same time, I'm a big believer in ands, not ors. And at the same time, bring more people in, share that light, teach, educate, lift as we climb, and keep going. Keep going. Yeah. Thanks, Sable. Yes, Ross. Oh, Vanessa says you get the last question.
Oh, wow.
Make it good.
Oh, okay. Before it wasn't going to be, so now. So I'm very proud to know you. And I think you're an incredibly reflective and thoughtful person. You took us back a decade. Could you take us back a little further and talk about who is teenage Sumi? And what would she say to you now if you could meet in like a Freaky Friday situation? And what would you say to her?
Wow, that is a great question.
Well,
that could be a whole theme of what matters to me and why going forward. I love that. Teenage Sumi had glasses, braces, and bangs. So picture that. There's a lot going on there. She was the kind of girl who had a lot of friends, was not the most popular, was involved in Amnesty International and the Young Feminist Club in high school, which is where all the cool kids were, as you can imagine, and the Advanced Honors Spanish Club. Thanks. She thought abstinence worked. Yeah, I remember that. And let's see, what else? She was idealistic and already political. I, as a young person, was politicized pretty early in the Reagan era. Early dinner table conversations about Sandinistas and Contras. and Nicaragua, and then also El Salvador and everything else. So I think the things that she would say to me are, well, one, will you ever find love? Okay, that was a big one in high school. I grew up in a context where it was primarily black and white, 48% black, 49% white. So it was a really unique, I think, context to grow up in because your sense of self, there were very few reflective mirrors. Not only did I grow up in the 80s, I was a child of the 80s, teenager of the 90s, so there was no media, there was no magazines, there was, whatever stuff we brought from India, but that was India, that wasn't Asian America or Indian America, right? So that question of like, will you find love was a real one. And I think I had pretty strong convictions even at an early age. And I wanted in the most big of sense, I wanted the world to be better. Be better, world, right? We read a lot, and so I was already seeing that. We had the Chicago Tribune at home, and I read the newspaper every day with my Cheerios. And I think today's Sumi would look back and say, well, number one, abstinence-only education doesn't work. Just want to put that policy point out there. And two, you will find love, and that will come in many, many beautiful forms, and that you will find a life partner who will not just be your partner in all the senses, but lift you and build you and be your one true love like you read about when you were growing up, but in the most expansive of ways. And I think that today's Sumi would look back at that Sumi and say, the world is not a better place yet, but we have the potential to make it so. And that if I didn't keep believing that then or now, I wouldn't have any reason to get up in the morning. So I would say keep on getting up to her and to me, and to say that the one thing I know now, of course, is that I know more of the complications, right? I know more of the vicissitudes, the specificities of how power and dominance and subordination work in the local and global context. So I'd say, you'll get smarter, and you also might get sadder, right? But that you will remain hopeful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
What Matters to Me and Why program, I present to you a beautiful journal to keep reflecting on your journey. Thank you so much for how much you shared with us today.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for making the time for me today. I appreciate you. Peace.